So today I have a question that's geared more towards my Kenyan followers, people who currently live back in Kenya, right? And I think it's a very important question and it's very relevant to the times that we're in right now. So that question is, how do young Kenyans view farming or agriculture in general, right? And I'm explaining where this comes from. So earlier today, I was watching a YouTube video. And the video was pretty much discussing how tech workers here in the US are currently making a shift based on what's going on in our economy, right? So I myself come from the tech field. I was a software engineer. And what a lot of engineers and people who come from tech are currently experiencing is the effects of AI and the instability within our industry. So right now, a lot of jobs are being lost, and a lot of people are taking months before they find another opportunity. And if they do find another opportunity, it's usually a lower opportunity from the positions that they held before. But overall, a lot of these tech workers are making transitions into the blue collar fields slash trades. Now, for those of my followers who aren't in the US and aren't sure of what those fields are, blue collar fields would slash trade fields would fall into things like an electrician, a plumber, what's it called, welders, people who pretty much work in careers that are more hands on, but those careers don't necessarily require a 4 year degree. These trade positions usually take like a trade school where you can go to for like a year, 2 years, maybe three, and then you get certified and you start working within that field. After a certain amount of years of experience, you get your full certification and you can practice on your own. So, with that happening here, it made me assess the same thing that's happening in Kenya. And what you often hear is that a lot of the Kenyan youth aren't able to find work. We have a highly educated population that is coming that they're coming out of college with these very nice degrees, very educated young individuals. But our economy doesn't have a place for them to plug into. And I would argue that the same thing is actually happening here in the US. A lot of, I've explained this in previous videos, a lot of the people who I would have been graduating college with, I dropped out, but a lot of the people who were in my class of 2021, they got their degrees. And I would argue most of them currently aren't in the fields that they studied. So, what you'll see here a lot of the time, people will go and study business, people will study psychology, a lot of fields that don't necessarily have a strong foundation to them. And then they end up working in some sales role somewhere in a company. They end up working as what's it called? Some customer service representative for some big corporation or some random office job that doesn't relate whatsoever to their degree, right? So I've seen it here. And the difference in Kenya is that we don't have that what's it called? Those white that we don't have such a large white collar industry as we do here in the US. So in here in the US, there's a lot of large companies that will hire you for different positions. They may not be high paying positions, but those companies still exist here, those white collar jobs. In Kenya, it's a different story. So these people who are graduating, these young individuals, they don't have the same opportunities to plug into and go and find a job and start working. But the reason I asked the question of how do the young people view farming comes from how I assess both economies and both countries, right? I would argue most Kenyans come from a farming background, whether it was their parents who farmed to put them through school or their grandparents who put their parents through school from what's it called, profits from their farms. A lot of us come back from a farming background. You can trace it back. It doesn't even have to go three, 4 generations. Probably your parents put you through school from their farm or their shamba, right? So I would argue that farming is a lot more accessible in Kenya than it would be here in the US. Here in the US, what's more accessible to the average person graduating is some job, whether you're working in the hospitality industry, like you're working in a restaurant, or you go find some hole in the wall white collar job where you're typing things or doing data entry. I would argue that those are the equivalents. Farming in Kenya or some average office job here in the US, right? So the we have the same issue. Kids graduating without degrees, no, with degrees, highly educated, but can't get into work in Kenya. And the same thing here, people graduating and can't get into their field. So I am a firm believer in pivoting. I'm a firm believer in if what you're going towards isn't working, you make a shift, right? Now, the the reason I asked the question as well is because certain careers in both countries have stigmas, right? So like growing up here, you would hear people saying, if you don't pay attention in school, you're gonna end up flipping burgers, you're gonna end up what's it called as a construction worker, you're gonna end up fixing toilets, right? And when you hear certain phrases like that, it's like almost demeaning certain careers, right? You have a lot of parents who will idolize a degree as if a degree guarantees success in life. Don't get me wrong, a degree does guarantee you will, on average, earn higher than most people, but you got to look at the world we're living in. That's part of the reason I dropped out myself. I made that personal assessment and I made my own personal decision. So when I look at how certain things here were looked down upon back in the day, like being a construction worker wasn't prized, but now you look at how much construction workers are earning compared to the people who got degrees. A lot of them are out earning the what's it called, the people who went and got degrees. When you look at those trade jobs, I have friends who've gone to become electricians and fresh out of their schooling, they're earning 80, $90,000. 90,000 is like a good income for somebody who graduated with a computer science degree and gets their first tech job. That's probably what they're gonna earn entry into tech, depending on where you live in the country. Some places you live, you'll start off with a salary of 200, but we're not talking about the outliers. We're talking about on average, right? 80, 90,000 is a lot. Those same white collar jobs that these highly educated college kids in America have to go and pick up that don't relate to their what's it called, their degree. Those jobs are not paying those people 70, 80,000 dollars, 80, 90,000. A lot of those people are getting these white collar jobs and earning, let's say 35, 40, 50,000, 60,000 if it's a good position, right? But on average, they're not earning that same amount that someone who comes out of the trades would earn. I'm gonna give you an example. Here in the US, no, not in the US, here in New York City, if I was to go to one of their trade schools because they're trying to like they're trying to encourage a lot of people to go into these trades because they're needed right now. Everybody for the past few decades went to college expecting the world to stay the same, but right now we have a shortage in these trade jobs. So there's a program here for welding, you know, making metal stick to metal. You guys know what welding is. And I actually looked at it and I was like, yo, these guys earn good money. Like on average, they're earning like 110, 125,000 a year. I'm like, they're competing with tech workers, right? The same people who were looked down upon a few years ago that you would have heard like, you don't want to be like him, stay in school. Because back then those jobs weren't paying that much. Now they're the ones earning the most, the actual things that are needed in society. So back to Kenya. I look at the stigmas when I look online. Certain things are looked down upon. Like I'll be online and I'll see like what's it called? People will like try to insult each other. Enda uza uji, right? Like go sell porridge. When you think about that, that's somebody in a sense looking down on the person who sells porridge in the streets, right? Or they'll say certain things, A B C D, basically showing classism in the sense of like go do that. Oh, like you come from Ushago, you come from go back to the village, right? But I look at it and I did some like assessments and I was looking at how much does the average acre in Kenya like return you depending on what you're farming. And a few months ago, I was also looking at some other videos of different young Kenyans who've left the city. They've left that grind, that hustle and bustle. They've left that looking for a job and never finding one, right? And they went back to their roots. They went back to their farm. They went back to their village and they got into farming. And a lot of what I was seeing is that those ones who left Nairobi and they left Nakuru or they left Eldoret or they left Naivasha or they left what's it called Mombasa and went back to their hometown, their home village, and got into farming, a lot of them have surpassed their friends in the city because a lot of their friends in the city are still looking for jobs. They have the same degrees. Even the ones who went back to the village, they're also educated, right? But they looked at the world that they were living in and they said, am I going to keep struggling here in Nairobi looking for the jobs or working menial jobs just to make it work? Or am I going to go back to what I know works? So that's a big question I ask. How do young Kenyans view farming? Because just the same way here, it was looked down upon to be a construction worker. Now they're earning more. When I look at the numbers in Kenya, let me pull up for an example. So you guys can tell me if I'm wrong or not, but I'm not in Kenya. So the best I can use is the resources online. So I looked at online, like just for example, even if you don't have an acre of land from your family, you could do what's it called? Not telefarming, but you could do farming in the sense where you rent land. There's a lot of people in Kenya who rent land for you to farm, right? Now, I looked, for example, like 1 acre of tomatoes in Kenya, and it said typical yield is average approximately like 8 to 10 tons per acre, right? And then I scrolled down and looked because I'm not gonna give you guys the full breakdown, all the numbers. There's gonna be a lot of jargon, but I'm just gonna go with 1 acre. Let's say you went to back to the village to farm tomatoes, right? From what I'm seeing here, 1 acre of tomatoes in Kenya, bottom line, can realistically yield 8 to 10 tons with average net profits of 800,000 to 1 million Kenyan shillings. But with proven hybrids and best practices, yields can be higher, reaching 1.5 to 2.8 million per acre are possible, right? So we're going to focus on the profits. It said on average, with the average yield of 8 to 10 tons, right? You could bring in 800,000 to 1 million Kenyan shillings. And that's profit after you've excluded your inputs and everything. So I look at that number, 800,000 to 1 million, and I'm like, that is a lot higher than what you see the average young Kenyan in Nairobi earning, right? So I did that as well. Let me see here. So it says like we don't have yet trusted update figures, but Gen Z has separate cohorts. Blah blah blah. The young informal earners, Gen Z, 18 to 24, often make under 4,000 Kenyan shillings a month. That's very low. Okay, 4,000 times 12, 12 times 4 is 48,000 in a year. That's very low, right? While entrepreneurial young adults may exceed 12,000 per month, menial earnings uh, probably vary widely depending on education sector and region, etc. Right? But overall, what I'm seeing is like if you're earning, let's say that 12,000, 15,000 Kenyan shillings, you're on the higher end of the young people who are struggling to find jobs. But on average, you're probably going to bring in 4, 6,000, 8,000 shillings, depending on what you're doing and where you live. So, my question comes back to how do these young people who have most likely a background in farming, how do they view it? Is it stigmatized the same way that being a construction worker or plumber once was here in the US, but now the plumbers are laughing in these kids with degrees' face because they're like, I earn 3 times what you earn. The same electrician or the same welder or the same, yeah, like everything I said, plumber, all that. they laugh in the faces of the people with degrees who look down upon them because they're just like, bro, you earned 40,000. You could barely live on 40,000 in this city or that city or this state. So you guys let me know in the comments. Do you think that most young Kenyans should look at farming not with the stigma? Don't look down on the person who stayed in the village because everyone, as the world modernizes, all these young people want to live in the city, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them. If you come from the village, your aspirations would be to obviously go to the city, find a good job, make it big. But let's be realistic. If the world we're living in right now is not changing to cater to those people in those cities with degrees and everything, you have to be real. You have to make that pivot and be real with yourself in the sense of, yes, there's a lot of money in the big city. The big city lifestyle is very attractive to a young person who's looking to grow in life. But at the same time, if you're going to go to Nairobi and struggle with everyone else earning menial wages, not giving yourself an opportunity to actually like progress in life, I personally, if I was in Kenya, I wouldn't have an issue going back, finding an acre somewhere, and trying to make my way. And I'll give you another example. I looked at 1 acre again for potatoes, right? Not even like trying to go large scale. Just somewhere remote. You go somewhere remote. Maybe you even set up a little shack for yourself to stay out there and feed yourself off the land. But somewhere you can sleep, this and the other. Rent a piece of land. Maybe you go get a loan for that initial rent and for the initial inputs, because I'm not gonna sit here and act like you just put seeds down. No, those seeds are gonna cost you money. Maybe 100,000, 200,000 shillings. Maybe if you save that over the few years in Nairobi, you use that as your way out of the city, your way to make more. Because if that initial investment can yield you what you would have earned in Nairobi in 2 years from 1 acre, hey, guess what? It makes sense. So I looked up for potatoes, and it said most smallholder farms average about 5 to 7 tons per acre. Da 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 da. And then I'm worried about profits. I'm not gonna bore you guys with what that goes for in the market, but it's pulling data from a lot of different things and finding what's the average of 1 kg of potatoes in Kenya and all that. And takeaway, depending on inputs, variety, and management. Let me see here. Okay, that's still talking about tonnage. I want to look at low end. Okay, give me the estimated low end net profits along with high end. That's what I want. Okay, so low end estimate. Production cost 62,000 to 85,000 per acre, includes seed, labor, fertilizer, etc. Yield 90 to 120 bags per acre, 100 kg each. Price 2,000 per bag. Da da da. So low yield scenario. Revenue is 180,000 Kenyan shillings. Cost 62,000. Net profit 118,000 per acre. Right. Let me divide that. If you're getting 118,000 on the low end, right? Let me double check. Make sure that's it. 118,000 on the low end. 118, 123 divided by 12 months. That's about 9,833, right? So, like I said, a lot of the people are earning less than that. A lot of the 18 to 24 are earning less than that. And at the same time, even though this still falls within the same range of that 10,000, maybe 15,000, 20,000 shillings per month, you got to think about your cost of life out there. If you are staying out there on your farm, feeding yourself and everything, you're not paying the rents in Nairobi. You're not, what's it calling? And if you've already rented that acre, you can put up a little shack for yourself, somewhere for you to sleep, somewhere for you to feed yourself, right? And you're saving a lot more money the cost of life in Nairobi is probably 5, 10 times higher than you being on a farm, you being back on your family farm and asking your parents or going to your grandma's and asking for the acre to farm. May not be feasible, may not be realistic, but like I said, you have to assess the economy you're in and what you have access to. Most Americans can't go farming. Most Americans don't even have the knowledge or the background in farming. Most Americans live too far away from farms. This country is very developed. For you to reach a farm, you have to go very, very far for farms to be plentiful. Most likely, if there's farms around you, if you're in the suburbs or if you're on the edge of cities, most farms around places like that aren't going to be large enough for you to rent a piece. You're going to have to go very rural for you to find a farmer to rent you land out here in the US. But in Kenya, everyone comes from a farming background. Everyone's family probably has a small shamba somewhere, or you can go rent land from other people. But you guys let me know. Am I saying don't go get educated? Absolutely not. But what I'm saying is if the opportunity to go into farming and agriculture is there, why aren't more young Kenyans doing it? I feel like the craft is going to be lost with our grandparents and our parents if there's not young people continuing it. But like I said, you can't look down on certain industries, but you guys let me know in the comment section. Do most young Kenyans look down on farming? Do they look at it as something that they wouldn't want to do? Is it also the stigma of their parents pressuring them to go find some city job, go find some corporate job? Because at the same time, that could be happening. You could have the parents who are stigmatizing their kid being a farmer. Meanwhile, the kid who went to go back into farming is out earning the city kids. So let me know in the comments, how do most young Kenyans view farming? Would they get into it or would they not? And that's the end of the video. I love y'all. See you on the next one. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe, and take care. Bye.